Okay, good to start. Hare Krishna devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. We'll continue reading our Srimad Bhagavatam. Today we'll be reading from Canto 4, Chapter 17, verse 11, until Canto 4, Chapter 23, verse 4. Okay, I'll start with the invocation prayers. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tatodayam Udirayet Shinvatam Swakata Krishna Punyashravana Kirtana Hridayantastya Hi Abhadrani Vidinoti Suhrut Satam Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Okay. Starting with text 10 and 11 is combined, so I'll read it again. So we are reading chapter Maharaja Prithu becomes angry at earth. Text 10. Dear King, just as a tree with a fire burning on the hollow of the trunk gradually dries up, we are drying up due to the fire of hunger in our stomachs. You are the protector of surrendered souls, and you have been appointed to give employment to us. Therefore, we have all come to you for protection. You are not only a king, but the incarnation of God as well. Indeed, you are the king of all kings. You can give us all kinds of occupational engagements, for you are the master of our livelihood. Therefore, O King of all kings, please arrange to satisfy our hunger by the proper distribution of food grains. Please take care of us, lest we soon die for want of food. Text 12. After hearing this lamentation and seeing the pitiable condition of the citizens, King Prithu contemplated this matter for a long time to see if he could find out the underlying causes. Text 13. Having arrived at a conclusion, the king took up his bow and arrow and aimed them at the earth, exactly like Lord Shiva, who destroys the whole world out of anger. Text 14. When the earth saw that King Prithu was taking his bow and arrow to kill her, she became very much afraid and began to tremble. She then began to flee, exactly like a deer, which runs very swiftly when followed by a hunter. Being afraid of King Prithu, she took the shape of a cow and began to run. Text 15. Seeing this, Maharaja Prithu became very angry and his eyes became as red as the early morning sun. Placing an arrow on his bow, he chased the cow-shaped earth wherever she would run. 16. The cow-shaped earth ran here and there in outer space between the heavenly planets and the earth, and wherever she ran, the king chased her with his bow and arrows. 17. Just as a man cannot escape the cruel hands of death, the cow-shaped earth could not escape the hands of the son of Vena. At length, the earth, fearful, her heart aggrieved, turned back in helplessness. Text 18. Addressing the great, opulent King Prithu as the knower of religious principles and shelter of the surrendered, she said, "Please save me. You are the protector of all living entities. Now you are situated as the king of this planet." 19. The cow-shaped earth continued to appeal to the king. "I am very poor and have not committed any sinful activities. I do not know why you want to kill me. Since you are supposed to be the knower of all religious principles, why are you so envious of me? Why are you so anxious to kill a woman?" Text 20. Even if a woman does commit some sinful activity, no one should place his hand upon her. And what to speak of you, dear king, who are so merciful? You are a protector and you are affectionate to the poor. Text 21. The cow-shaped earth continued, "My dear king, I am just like a strong boat and all the paraphernalia of the world is standing upon me. If you break me to pieces, how can you protect yourself and your subjects from drowning? Text 22. King Prithu replied to the earthly planet, My dear earth, you have disobeyed my orders and rulings. In the form of a demigod, you accepted your share of the yajnas we performed, but in return, you have not produced sufficient food grains. For this reason, I must kill you. Text 23. Although you are eating green grass every day, you are not filling your milk bag so we can utilize your milk. Since you are willfully committing offenses, it cannot be said that you are not punishable due to your assuming the form of a cow. Text 24. You have so lost your intelligence that despite my orders, you do not deliver the seeds of herbs and grains formerly created by Brahma and now hidden within yourself. Text 25. Now, with the help of my arrows, I shall cut you to pieces, and with your flesh satisfy the hunger stricken citizens who are now crying for want of grains. Thus I shall satisfy the crying citizens of my kingdom. 26. Any cruel person, be he a man, woman, or impotent eunuch, who is only interested in his personal maintenance and has no compassion for other living entities, may be killed by the king. Such killing can never be considered actual killing. 27. You are very much puffed up with pride and have become almost insane. Presently, you have assumed the form of a cow by your mystic powers. Nonetheless, I shall cut you into small pieces like grain, and I will uphold the entire population by my personal mystic powers. 28. At this time, Prithu Maharaja became exactly like Yamaraja, and his whole body appeared very angry. In other words, he was anger personified. After hearing him, the planet Earth began to tremble. She surrendered and with folded hands began to speak as follows. 29. The planet Earth spoke. My dear Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, you are transcendental in your position and your material energy, and by your material energy, you have expanded yourself in various forms and species of life through the interaction of the three modes of material nature. Unlike some other masters, you always remain in your transcendental position and are not affected by the material creation, which is subject to different material interactions. Consequently, you are not bewildered by material activities. Text 30. The planet Earth continued, My dear Lord, you are the complete conductor of the material creation. You have created this cosmic manifestation and the three material qualities, and therefore you have created me, the planet Earth, the resting place of all living entities. Yet you are always fully independent, my Lord. Now that you are present before me and ready to kill me with your weapons, let me know where I should go to take shelter, and tell me who can give me protection. Text 31. In the beginning of creation, you created all these moving and non-moving living entities by your inconceivable energy. Through this very same energy, you are now prepared to protect the living entities. Indeed, you are the supreme protector of religious principles. Why are you so anxious to kill me, even though I am in the form of a cow? 32. My dear Lord, although you are one, by your inconceivable potencies, you have expanded yourself in many forms. Through the agency of Brahma, you have created this universe. You are therefore directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Those who are not sufficiently experienced cannot understand your transcendental activities because these persons are covered by your illusory energy. Text 33. My dear Lord, by your own potencies, you are the original cause of the material elements, the performing instruments, the senses, the workers of the senses, the controlling demigods, the intelligence and the ego, as well as everything else. By your energy, you manifest this entire cosmic creation, maintain it, and dissolve it. Through your energy alone, everything is sometimes manifest and sometimes not manifest. You are therefore the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cause of all causes. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Text 34. My dear Lord, you are always unborn. Once in the form of the original boar, you rescued me from the waters in the bottom of the ocean. Through your own energy, you created all the physical elements, the senses, and the heart for the maintenance of the world. Text 35. My dear Lord, in this way, you once protected me by rescuing me from the water, and consequently, your name has been famous as Dharadhara, he who holds the planet Earth. Yet at the present moment, in the form of a great hero, you are about to kill me with sharpened arrows. I am, however, just like a boat on the water, keeping everything afloat. Text 36. My dear Lord, I am also the creation of one of your energies, composed of the three modes of material nature. Consequently, I am bewildered by your activities. Even the activities of your devotees cannot be understood, and what to speak of your pastimes. Thus, everything appears to us to be contradictory and wonderful. Thus ends chapter 17. Who wants to read next? Sorry, I didn't watch the. Okay. Mother Malati, you want to read chapter 17? You're muted.
I can read chapter 18.
Okay. Veda will read chapter 18. Mother Malati, you're muted. We can't hear you.
Sorry, excuse me.
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yeah.
Prithu Maharaj milks the earth planet. The great saint Maitreya continued to address Vidura. My dear Vidura, at that time, after the planet Earth finished her prayers, King Prithu was still not pacified, and his lips trembled in great anger. Although the planet Earth was frightened, she made up her mind and began to speak as follows in order to convince the king. My dear Lord, please pacify your anger completely and hear patiently whatever I submit before you. Please turn your kind attention to this. I may be very poor, but a learned man takes the essence of knowledge from all places, just as a bumblebee collects honey from each and every flower. To benefit all human society, not only in this life, but in the next, the great seers and sages have prescribed various methods conducive to the prosperity of the people in general. One who follows the principles and instructions enjoined by the great sages of the past can utilize these instructions for practical purposes. Such a person can very easily enjoy life and pleasures. A foolish person who manufactures his own ways and means through mental speculation and does not recognize the authority of sages who lay down unimpeachable directions is simply unsuccessful again and again in his attempts. Text 6. My dear King, the seeds, roots, herbs, and grains which were created by Lord Brahma in the past are now being used by non-devotees who are devoid of all spiritual understanding. 7. My dear King, not only are grains and herbs being used by non-devotees, but as far as I am concerned, I am being neglected by kings who are not punishing these rascals, who have turned into thieves by using grains for sense gratification. Consequently, I have hidden all these seeds, which were meant for the performance of sacrifice. 8. Due to being stocked for a very long time, all the grain seeds within me have certainly deteriorated. Therefore, you should immediately arrange to take these seeds out of the standard process, which is recommended by the Acharyas or Shastras. 9 and 10. O great hero, protector of living entities, you desire to relieve the living entities by supplying them sufficient grain. And if you desire to nourish them by taking milk from me, you should make arrangements to bring a calf suitable for this purpose and a pot in which the milk can be kept, as well as a milkman to do the work. Since I will be very much affectionate towards my calf, your desire to take milk from me will be fulfilled. My dear king, may I inform you that you have to make the entire surface of the globe level. This will help me even when the rainy season has ceased. Rainfall comes by the mercy of King Indra. Rainfall will remain on the surface of the globe, always keeping the earth moistened, and thus it will be auspicious for all kinds of productions. After hearing the auspicious and pleasing words of the planet Earth, the king accepted them. He then transformed Swayambhuva Manu into a calf and milked the herbs and grains from the earth in the form of a cow, keeping them in his cupped hands. 13. Others who were as intelligent as King Prithu also took the essence out of the earthly planet. Indeed, everyone took this opportunity to follow in the footsteps of King Prithu and get whatever he desired from the planet Earth. 14. All the great sages transformed Brihaspati into a calf, and making the senses into a pot, they milked all kinds of Vedic knowledge to purify words, mind, and hearing. All the demigods made Indra, the king of heaven, into a calf, and from the earth they milked the beverage soma, which is nectar. Thus they became very powerful in mental speculation and bodily and sensual strength. 16. The sons of Diti and the demons transformed Prahlad Maharaj, who was born in an Ashura family, into a calf, and they extracted various kinds of liquor and beer, which they put into a pot made of iron. 17. The inhabitants of a Gandharva Loka and Apsara Loka made Vishvavasu into a calf, and they drew the milk into a lotus flower pot. The milk took the shape of sweet musical art and beauty. Text 9. The fortunate inhabitants of Pitraloka, who preside over the funeral ceremonies, made Aryama into a calf. With great faith, they milked kavya, food offered to the ancestors, into an unbaked earthen pot. Text 19. After this, the inhabitants of Siddhaloka, as well as the inhabitants of Vidyaharaloka, transformed the great sage Kapila into a calf, and making the whole sky into a pot, they milked out specific yogic mystic powers, beginning with anima. Indeed, the inhabitants of Vidyaharaloka acquired the art of flying in the sky. Text 20. Others also, the inhabitants of planets known as Kimpurushaloka, made the demon Maya into a calf, and they milked out mystic powers by which one can disappear immediately from another's vision and appear again in a different form. 21. Then the yakshas, rakshasas, ghosts, and witches who are habituated to eating flesh transformed Lord Shiva's incarnation, Rudra, Bhutanath, into a calf and milked out beverages made of blood and put them in a pot made of skulls. 29. Thereafter, cobras and snakes without hoods, large snakes, scorpions, and many other poisonous animals took poison out of the planet Earth as their milk and kept this poison in snake holes. And they made a calf out of takshaka. 23 and 24. The four-legged animals like the cows made a calf out of the bull who carries Lord Shiva and made a milking pot out of the forests. Thus they got fresh green grasses to eat. Ferocious animals like tigers transformed a lion into a calf, and thus they were able to get flesh for milk. The birds made a calf out of Garuda and took milk from the planet Earth in the form of moving insects and non-moving plants and grasses. 25. The trees made a calf out of the banyan tree, and thus they derived milk in the form of many delicious juices. The mountains transformed the Himalayas into a calf, and they milked a variety of minerals into a pot made of the hills of the peaks of hills. 26. The planet Earth supplied everyone his respective food. During the time of King Prithu, the earth was fully under the control of the king. Thus, all the inhabitants of the earth could get their food supply by creating various types of calves and putting their particular types of milk in various pots. My dear Vidura, chief of the Kurus, in this way, King Prithu and all the others who subsist on food created different types of calves and milked out of their respective eatables, thus received their various foodstuffs, which were symbolized as milk. 28. Thereafter, King Prithu was very satisfied with the planet Earth, for she sufficiently supplied all food to various living entities. Thus, he developed an affection for the planet Earth, just as if she were his own daughter. 29. After this, the king of all kings, Maharaj Prithu, leveled all the rough places on the earth, on the surface of the globe, by breaking up the hills with the strength of his bow. By his grace, the surface of the globe almost became flat. To all the citizens of the state, King Prithu was as good as a father. Thus, he was visibly engaged in giving them proper subsistence and proper employment for subsistence. After leveling the surface of the globe, he earmarked different places for residential quarters, inasmuch as they were desirable. 31. In this way, the king founded many types of villages, settlements, and towns, and built forts, residence for cowherdsmen, stables for the animals, places for the royal camps, mining places, agricultural towns, and mountain villages. 32. Before the reign of King Prithu, there was no planned arrangement for different cities, villages, pasturing grounds, etc. Everything was scattered and everyone constructed his residential quarters according to his own convenience. However, from the time of King Prithu, plans were made for towns and villages.
Thank you, Mataji. Yeah, Veda, you can continue reading chapter 19. Yeah.
Hare Krishna. Chapter 19. King Prithu's 100 horse sacrifices. Text 1. The great sage Maitreya continued. My dear Vidura, King Prithu initiated the performance of 100 horse sacrifices at the spot where the river Saraswati flows towards the east. This piece of land is known as Brahmavarta, and it was controlled by Swayambhuva Manu. Text 2. When the most powerful Indra, the king of heaven, saw this, he considered the fact that King Prithu was going to exceed him in fruitive activities. Thus, Indra could not tolerate the great sacrificial ceremonies performed by King Prithu. Text 3. Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, is present in everyone's heart as the Supersoul, and he is the proprietor of all planets and the enjoyer of the results of all sacrifices. He was personally present at the sacrifices made by King Prithu. Text 4. When Lord Vishnu appeared in the sacrificial arena, Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and all the chief predominating personalities of every planet, as well as their followers, came with him. When he appeared on the scene, the residents of Gandharva Loka, the great sages, and the residents of Apsara Loka all praised him. Text 5. The Lord was accompanied by the residents of Siddha Loka and Vidyadhara Loka. all the descendants of Diti, and the demons and the Yakshas. He was also accompanied by his chief associates, headed by Sunanda and Nanda. Text 6. Great devotees who were always engaged in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as well as the great sages named Kapila, Narada, and Dattatreya, the masters of mystic powers, headed by Sanak Kumar, all attended the great sacrifice with Lord Vishnu. Text 7. My dear Vidura, in that great sacrifice, the entire land came to be like the milk-producing Kamadhenu, and thus, by the performance of Yajna, all daily necessities for life were supplied. Text 8. The flowing rivers supplied all kinds of tastes, sweet, pungent, sour, etc., and very big trees supplied fruit and honey in abundance. The cows, having eaten sufficient green grasses, supplied profuse quantities of milk, curd, clarified butter, and similar other necessities. Text 9. King Prithu was presented with various gifts from the general populace and predominating deities of all planets. The oceans and seas were full of valuable jewels and pearls, and the hills were full of chemicals and fertilizers. 4 kinds of edibles were produced profusely. Text 10. King Prithu was dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is known as Adokshaja. Because King Prithu performed so many sacrifices, he was superhumanly enhanced by the mercy of the Supreme Lord. King Prithu's opulence, however, could not be tolerated by the king of heaven, Indra, who tried to impede the progress of his opulence. Text 11. When Prithu Maharaj was performing the last horse sacrifice, Ashwamedha Yajna, King Indra, invisible to everyone, stole the horse intended for sacrifice. He did this because of his great envy of King Prithu. Text 12. When King Indra was taking away the horse, he dressed himself to appear as a liberated person. Actually, this dress was a form of cheating, for it falsely created an impression of religion. When Indra went into outer space in this way, the great sage Atri saw him and understood the whole situation. Text 13. When the son of King Prithu was informed by Atri of King Indra's trick, he immediately became very angry and followed Indra to kill him, calling, "Wait, wait." Text 14. King Indra was fraudulently dressed as a sannyasi, having knotted his hair on his head and smeared ashes all over his body. Upon seeing such dress, the son of King Prithu considered Indra a religious man and pious sannyasi. Therefore, he did not release his arrows. Text 15. When Atri Muni saw that the son of King Prithu did not kill Indra but returned deceived by him, Atri Muni again instructed him to kill the heavenly king because he thought that Indra had become the lowest of all demigods due to his impeding the execution of King Prithu's sacrifice. Text 16. Being thus informed, the grandson of King Vena immediately began to follow Indra, who was fleeing through the sky in great haste. He was very angry with him, and he chased him just as the king of the vultures chased Ravana. Text 17. When Indra saw that the son of Prithu was chasing him, he immediately abandoned his false dress and left the horse. Indeed, he disappeared from that very spot, and the great hero, the son of Maharaj Prithu, returned the horse to his father's sacrificial arena. Text 18. My dear Lord Vidura, when the great sages observed the wonderful prowess of the son of King Prithu, they all agreed to give him the name Vijitashva. Text 19. My dear Vidura, Indra, being the king of heaven and very powerful, immediately brought a dense darkness upon the sacrificial arena. Covering the whole scene in this way, he again took away the horse, which was chained with golden shackles near the wooden instrument where animals were sacrificed. Text 20. The great sage Atri again pointed out to the son of King Prithu that Indra was fleeing through the sky. The great hero, the son of Prithu, chased him again. But when he saw that Indra was carrying in his hand a staff with a skull at the top and was again wearing a dress of a sannyasi, he still chose not to kill him. Text 21. When the great sage Atri again gave directions, the son of King Prithu became very angry and placed an arrow on his bow. Upon seeing this, King Indra immediately abandoned the false dress of a sannyasi and, giving up the horse, made himself invisible. Text 22. When the great hero Vijitashva, the son of King Prithu, again took the horse and returned to his father's sacrificial Then the great hero Vijitashva, the son of King Prithu, again took the horse and returned to his father's sacrificial arena. Since that time, certain men with a poor fund of knowledge have adopted the dress of a false sannyasi. It was King Indra who introduced this. Text 23. Whatever different forms Indra assumed as a mendicant because of his desire to seize the horses were symbols of atheistic philosophy. Text 24 and 25. In this way, King Indra, in order to steal the horse from King Prithu's sacrifice, adopted several orders of sannyas. Some sannyasis go naked, and sometimes they wear red garments and pass under the name of kapalika. These are simply symbolic representations of their sinful activities. These so-called sannyasis are very much appreciated by sinful men because they are all godless atheists and very expert in putting forward arguments and reasons to support their case. We must know, however, that they are only passing as adherents of religion and are not so in fact. Unfortunately, bewildered persons accept them as religious, and being attracted to them, they spoil their life. Text 26. Maharaj Prithu, who was celebrated as very powerful, immediately took up his bow and arrows and prepared to kill Indra himself, because Indra had introduced such irregular sannyas orders. Text 27. When the priests and all the others saw Maharaj Prithu very angry and prepared to kill Indra, they requested him, "O great soul, do not kill him, for only sacrificial animals can be killed in a sacrifice." Such are the directions given by Shastra. Text 28. Dear King, Indra's powers are already reduced due to his attempt to impede the execution of your sacrifice. We shall call him by Vedic mantras, which were never before used, and certainly he will come. Thus, by the power of our mantra, we shall cast him into the fire because he is your enemy. Text 29. My dear Vidura, after giving the king this advice, the priests who had been engaged in performing the sacrifice called for Indra, the king of heaven, in a mood of great anger. When they were just ready to put the oblation in the fire, Lord Brahma appeared on the scene and forbade them to start the sacrifice. Text 30. Lord Brahma addressed them thus: My dear sacrificial performers, you cannot kill Indra, the king of heaven. It is not your duty. You should know that Indra is as good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Indeed, he is one of the most powerful assistants of the Personality of Godhead. You're trying to satisfy all the demigods by the performance of this yajna, but you should know that all these demigods are but parts and parcels of Indra, the king of heaven. How then can you kill him in this great sacrifice? Text 31. In order to make trouble and impede the performance of King Prithu's great sacrifice, King Indra has adopted some means that in the future will destroy the clear path of religious life. I draw your attention to this fact. If you oppose him any further, he will further misuse his power and introduce many other irreligious systems. Text 32. Let there be only 99 sacrificial performances for Maharaj Prithu, Lord Brahma concluded. Lord Brahma then turned towards Maharaj Prithu and informed him that since he was thoroughly aware of the path of liberation, what was the use in performing more sacrifices? Text 33. Lord Brahma continued, Let there be good fortune to both of you, for you and King Indra are both part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, you should not be angry with King Indra, who is non-different from you. Text 34. My dear King, do not be agitated and anxious because your sacrifices have not been properly executed due to providential impediments. Kindly take my words with great respect. We should always remember that if something happens by providential arrangement, we should not be very sorry. The more we try to rectify such reversals, the more we enter into the darkest region of materialistic thought. Text 35. Lord Brahma continued, Stop the performance of these sacrifices, for they have induced Indra to introduce so many religious aspects. You should know very well that even amongst the demigods, there are many unwanted desires. Text 36. Just see how Indra, the king of heaven, was creating a disturbance in the midst of the sacrifice by stealing the sacrificial horse. These attractive, sinful activities he has introduced will be carried out by the people in general. Text 37. O King Prithu, son of Vena, you are the part and parcel expansion of Lord Vishnu. Due to the mischievous activities of King Vena, religious principles were almost lost. At that opportune moment, you descended as the incarnation of Lord Vishnu. Indeed, For the protection of religious principles, you have appeared from the body of King Vena. Text 38. O protector of the people in general, please consider the purpose of your being incarnated by Lord Vishnu. The irreligious principles created by Indra are but mothers of so many unwanted religions. Please therefore stop these imitations immediately. Text 39. The great sage Maitreya continued. When King Prithu was thus advised by the supreme teacher, Lord Brahma, he abandoned his eagerness to perform yajnas and with great affection concluded a peace with King Indra. Text 40. After this, Prithu Maharaj took his bath, which is customarily taken after the performance of a yajna, and received the benedictions and due blessings of the demigods, who were very pleased by his glorious activities. Text 41. With great respect, the original king, Prithu, offered all kinds of rewards to the brahmanas present at the sacrifice. Since all these brahmanas were very much satisfied, they gave their heartfelt blessings to the king. Text 42. All the great sages and brahmanas said, O mighty king, by your invitation, all classes of living entities have attended this assembly. They have come from Pitraloka and the heavenly planets, and great sages as well as common men have attended this meeting. Now, all of them are very much satisfied by your dealings and your charity towards them.
Thank you, Veda. Sikshashtaka Mataji, you can go ahead.
Hi, Krishna. Chapter 20. Lord Vishnu's appearance in the sacrificial arena of Maharaj Prithu. The great sage Maitreya continued, My dear Vidura, being very much satisfied by the performance of 99 horse sacrifice, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, appeared on the scene. Accompanying by his king Indra, Lord Vishnu then began to speak. Text 2. Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, said, My dear King Prithu, Indra, the King of Heaven, has disturbed by your execution of 100 sacrifices. Now he has come with me to be forgiven by you. Therefore, excuse him. Text 3. O King, one who is advanced in intelligence and eager to perform welfare activities for others is considered best among us human beings. An advanced human being is never malicious to others. Those with advanced intelligence are always conscious that this material body is different from the soul. Text 4. If a personality like you, who are so much advanced because of executing the instructions of the previous acharyas, is carried away by the influence by my material energy, then all your advancement may be considered simply a waste of time. Text 5. Those who are in full knowledge of the bodily conception of life, who know that this body is composed of machines, desires, and activities resulting from illusion, do not become addicted to the body. Text 6. How can a highly learned person who has absolutely no affinity for the bodily conception of life be affected by the bodily conception in regard to house, children, wealth, and similar other bodily productions? 7. The individual soul is one, pure, non-material, and self-effulgent. He is the reservoir of all good qualities, and he is all-pervading. He is without material covering, and he is the witness of all activities. He is completely distinguished from other living entities, and he is transcendental to all embodied souls. Text 8. Although within the material nature, one who is thus situated in full knowledge of the Paramatma and Atma is never affected by the mode of material nature, for he is always situated in my transcendental loving service. 9. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, continued, My dear King Prithu, when one situated in his occupational duty engages in my loving service without motive for material gain, he gradually becomes very satisfied within. Text 10. When the heart is cleansed of all material contamination, the devotee's mind becomes broader and transparent, and he can see things equally. At this stage of life, there is peace, and one is situated equally with me as Satchidananda Vigraha. Text 11. Anyone who knows that the material body made of the five gross elements, the sense organs, the working senses, and the mind is simply supervised by the fixed soul is eligible to be liberated from the material bondage. Text 12. Lord Vishnu told King Prithu, my dear king, the constant change of this material world is due to the interaction of the three modes of material nature. The five elements, the senses, the demigods who control the senses, as well as the mind, which is agitated by the spirit soul. All these taken together compress the body. Since the spirit soul is completely different from this combination of gross and subtle material elements, my devotees, who is connected with me in intense friendship and affection, being completely in knowledge, is never agitated by material happiness and distress. 13. My dear heroic king, please keep yourself away, equipoised, and treat people equally, whether they are greater than you, in the intermediate stage, or lower than you. Do not be disturbed by temporary distress or happiness. Fully control your mind and senses. In this transcendental position, try to execute your duty as king in whatever condition of life you may be posted by my arrangement. For your only duty here is to give protection to the citizens of your kingdom. Text 14. To give protection to the general mass of people who are citizens of the state is the prescribed occupational duty for a king. By acting in that way, the king in the next life shares 1/6 of the results of the pious activities of the citizens. But a king or executive head of state who simply collects taxes from the citizens but does not give the proper protection as a human being has the result of his own pious activities taken away by the citizens. And in exchange for his not giving protection, he becomes liable to punishment for the impious activities of his subjects. Text 15. Lord Vishnu continued, my dear King Prithu, if you continue to protect the citizens according to the instructions of the learned Brahmana authorities, as they are received by disciple succession, by hearing from master to disciple, and if you follow the religious principles laid down by them, without attachment to ideas manufactured by mental concoction, then every one of your citizens will be happily and will love you. And very soon you will be able to see such already liberated personalities as 4 Kumaras, Sanaka, Sanatana, Sanandana, and Sanat Kumara. 16. My dear king, I'm very captivated by your elevated qualities and excellent behavior, and thus I'm very favorably inclined toward you. You may therefore ask from me any benediction you like. One who does not possess elevated qualities and behavior cannot possibly achieve my favor simply by performance of sacrifice, serve severe austerities, or mystic yoga. But I always remain equipoised in the heart of one who is also equipoised in all circumstance. 17. The great saint Maitreya continued, my dear Vidura, in this way Maharaj Prithu, the conqueror of the entire world, accepted the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead on his head. 18. As King Indra was standing by, he became ashamed of his own activities and fell down before King Prithu to touch his lotus feet, but Prithu Maharaj immediately embraced him in great ecstasy and gave up all envy against him for his having stolen the horse meant for sacrifice. 19. King Prithu abundantly worshipped the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who was so merciful to him. While worshipping the feet of the Lord, Prithu Maharaj gradually increased the ecstasy in devotional service. Text 20. The Lord was just about to leave, but because he was so greatly inclined towards the behavior of King Prithu, he did not depart. Seeing the behavior of Maharaj Prithu with his lotus eyes, he was detained because he is always the well-wisher of his devotees. 21. The original king, Maharaj Prithu, his eyes full of tears and his voice flattering and choked up, could neither see the Lord very distinctly nor speak to address the Lord in any way. He simply embraced the Lord within his heart and remained standing in that way with folded hands. 22. The Supreme Personality of Godhead stood with his lotus feet almost touching the ground while he rested the front of his hand on the raised shoulder of Garuda. The enemy of the snake, Maharaj Prithu, wiping the tears from his eyes, tried to look upon the Lord, but it appeared that the king was not fully satisfied by looking at him. Thus the king offered the following prayers. 23. My dear Lord, you are the best of the demigods who can offer benedictions. Why, therefore, should any learned person ask you for benediction meant for living entities delivered by the modes of nature? Such benedictions are available automatically. Even in the lives of living entities suffering in hellish conditions, my dear Lord, you can certainly bestow merging into your existence, but I don't wish to have such a benediction. 24. My dear Lord, I therefore do not wish to have the benediction of merging into your existence, a benediction in which there is no existence of the nectarian beverage of your lotus feet. I want the benediction of the least 1 million. I want the benediction of at least 1 million years, for thus I may be able to hear about the glories of your lotus feet from the mouth of your pure devotees. 25. My dear Lord, you are glorified by the selected verses uttered by great personalities. Such glorification of your lotus feet is like saffron particles. When the transcendental vibration from the mouth of great devotees carries the aroma of the saffron dust of your lotus feet, the forgetful living entities gradually remembers his eternal relationship with you. Devotees thus gradually come to the right conclusion about the value of life. My dear Lord, I therefore do not need any other benediction but the opportunity to hear from the mouth of your pure devotees. 26. My dear, highly glorified Lord, if one in the association of pure devotees hears even once the glories of your activities, he does not unless he is nothing but an animal. Give up the association of devotees, for no intelligent person would be so careless as to leave their association. The perfection of chanting and hearing about your glories was accepted even by the goddess of fortune, who desired to hear to your unlimited activities and transcendental glories. Text 27. Now I wish to engage in the service of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and to serve just like the goddess of fortune, who carries a lotus flower in hand, because his lordship, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the reservoir of all transcendental qualities. I am afraid that goddess of fortune, and I would quarrel because both of us would be attentively engaged in the same service. 28. My dear Lord of the universe, the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi is the mother of the universe, and yet I think that she may be angry with me because of my intruding upon her service and acting on that very platform to which she is much attached. Yet I am hopefully that even though there is some misunderstanding, you will take my part, for you are very much inclined to the poor, and you always magnify even significant service onto you. Therefore, even though she becomes angry, I think that there is no harm for you because you are so self-sufficient and that you can do without her. Text 29. Great saintly persons who are always liberated take to your devotional service, because only by devotional service can one be relieved from the illusion of material existence. Oh my Lord, there is no reason for the liberated souls to take shelter at your lotus feet, except that such souls are constantly thinking of your feet. Text 30. My dear Lord, that you have said to your unloyed devotee is certainly very much bewildering. The allurements you offer in the Vedas are certainly not suitable for pure devotees. People in general, bounded by the sweet words of the Vedas, engage themselves again and again in fruitive activities, enamored by the results of their actions. Text 31. My dear Lord, due to your illusionary energy, all living beings in the material world have forgotten their real constitution position, and out of ignorance, they are always desirous of material happiness in the form of society, friendship, and love. Therefore, people do not ask me to take some material benefits from you, but as a father, not waiting for the son's demand, does everything for the benefit of the sons. Please bestow upon me whatever you think best for me. 32. The great sage Maitreya continued by saying that the Lord, the seer of the universe, after hearing Prithu Maharaj's prayers, addressed the king, My dear king, may you always be blessed by engaging in my devotional service. Only by such purity of purpose as you yourself very intelligently express can one cross over the insurmountable illusionary energy of Maya. 33. My dear king, O protector of the citizen, henceforward be very careful to execute my orders and not be misled by anything. Anyone who lives in that way, simply carrying out my orders faithfully, will also find good fortune all over the world. 34. The great saint Maitreya told Bhadra, the Supreme Personality of Godhead appreciate the meaningful prayers of Maharaj Prithu. Thus, after being properly worshipped by the king, the Lord blessed him and decided to depart. Text 35 to 36. King Prithu worshipped the demigods, the great sages, the inhabitants of Pitraloka, the inhabitants of Gandharvaloka, and those of Siddhaloka, Charanaloka, Pannagaloka, Kinnaraloka, Apsaraloka, the earthly planets and the planets of the birds. He also worshipped many other living entities who presented themselves in the sacrificial arena. With folded hands, he worshipped all these as well as Supreme Personality of Godhead and the personal association of the Lord by offering sweet words and as much wealth as possible. After this function, they all went back to their respective abodes, following in the footsteps of Lord Vishnu. Text 37. The infallible Supreme Personality of Godhead, having captivated the minds of the king and the priests who were present, returned to his abode in the spiritual sky. Text 38. King Prithu then offered his respectful obeisance unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the Supreme Lord of all demigods. Although not an object of material vision, the Lord revealed himself to the sight of Maharaj Prithu. After offering obeisance to the Lord, the king returned to his home. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. Gaurakarna Mataji, You can go ahead.
Yeah.
Chapter 21. Yeah.
Instructions, chapter 21, instruction by Maharaj Prithu. Text 1. The great sage Maitreya told Vidura, when the king entered his city, he was very beautifully decorated to receive him with pearls, flower garlands, beautiful cloth, and golden gates. And the entire city was perfumed with highly fragrant incense. Text 2. Fragrant water distilled from sandalwood and aguru herb was sprinkling everywhere on the lane, roads, and small parks throughout the city, and everywhere were decorations of unbroken fruit, flowers, withered grains, varied minerals, and lamps, and presented as suspicious paraphernalia. Text 3. As at the street crossings, there were bunches of fruits and flowers, as well as pillars of banana trees and betel nut branches. All these combined decorations everywhere looked very attractive. Text 4. As the king entered the gate of the city, all the citizens received him with many auspicious articles like lamps, flowers, and yogurt. The king was also received by many beautiful and merry girls whose bodies were bedecked with various ornaments, especially with earrings which collided with one another. Text 5. When the king entered the palace, conch shells and kettle drums were sounded. Priests chanted Vedic mantras, and professional reciters offered different prayers. But in spite of all this ceremony to welcome him, the king was not the least bit affected. Text 6. Both the important citizens and the common citizens welcomed the king very heartily, and he also bestowed upon them their desired blessings. Text 7. King Prithu was greater than the greatest soul and was therefore worshipable by everyone. He performed many glorious activities in ruling over the surface of the world and was always magnanimous. After achieving such great success and a reputation which spread throughout the universe, he at last obtained the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 8. Sutta Goswami continued, O Sanaka, leader of the great sages, after hearing Maitreya speak about the various activities of King Prithu, the original king, who was fully qualified, glorified, and widely praised all over the world, Vidura, the great devotee, very submissively worshipped Maitreya Rishi and asked him the following question. Text 9. Vidura said, My dear Brahmana Maitreya, it is very enlightening to understand that King Prithu was enthroned by the great sages and Brahmanas. All the demigods presented him with innumerable gifts, and he also expanded his influence upon personally receiving strength from Lord Vishnu, so he greatly developed the earth. Text 10. Prithu Maharaj was so great in his activities and magnanimous in his method of ruling that all the kings and demigods of the various planets still follow in his footsteps. Who is there who will not try to hear about his glorious activities? I wish to hear more and more about Prithu Maharaj because his activities are so pious and auspicious. Text 11. The great saintly sage Maitreya told Vidura, My dear Vidura, King Prithu lived in the tract of land between the two rivers, Ganges and Jamuna. Because he was very opulent, it appeared that he was enjoying his destined fortune in order to diminish the result of his past pious activities. Text 12. Maharaj Prithu was an unrivaled king and possessed the scepter for ruling all the 7 islands on the surface of the globe. No one could disobey his irrevocable orders but the saintly persons, the Brahmanas and the descendants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Vaishnavas. Text 13. Once upon a time, King Prithu initiated the performance of a very great sacrifice in which great saintly sages, Brahmanas, demigods from higher planetary systems, and great saintly kings known as Rajasis all assembled together. Text 14. In that great assembly, Maharaj Prithu first of all worshipped all the respectable visitors according to their respective positions. After this, he stood up in the midst of the assembly, and he appeared that the full moon has rising among the stars. Text 15. King Prithu's body was tall and sturdy, and his complexion was fair. His arms were full of broad, and his eyes as bright as the rising sun. His nose was straight, his face very beautiful, and his personality grave. His teeth were set beautifully in his smiling face. Text 16. The chest of Maharaj Prithu was very broad, his waist was very thick, and his abdomen wrinkled by lines of skin, resembling in construction a leaf of a banyan tree. His navel was coiled and deep, his thighs were a golden hue, and his instep were arched. Text 17. The black, sleek hair on his head was very fine and curly, and his neck, like a conch shell, was decorated with auspicious lines. He wore a very valuable dhoti, and there was a nice wrapper on the upper part of his body. Text 18. As Maharaj Prithu was being initiated to perform the sacrifice, he had to leave aside his valuable dress, and therefore his naturally body beauty was visible. It was very pleasing to see him put on a black deerskin and wear a ring of kusha grass on his finger, for this increased the natural beauty of his body. He appears that Maharaj Prithu observed all the regulative principles before he performed the sacrifice. Text 19. Just to encourage the members of the assembly and to enhance their pleasure, King Prithu glanced over them with eyes that seemed like stars in the sky wet with dew. He then spoke to them in a great voice. Text 20. Maharaj Prithu's speech was very beautiful, full of metaphorical language, clearly understandable and very pleasing to hear. His words were all grave and certain. It appears that when he spoke, he expressed his personal realization of the absolute truth in order to benefit all who were there present. Text 21. King Prithu said, "O gentle members of the assembly, may all God's fortune be upon you. May all of your great souls who have come to attend this meeting kindly hear my prayer attentively. A person who is actually inquisitive must present his decision before an assembly of noble souls." Text 22. King Prithu continued, "By the grace of the Supreme Lord, I have been appointed the king of this planet, and I carry the scepter to rule the citizens, protect them from all danger, and give them employment according to the respective positions in the social order established by Vedic injunction." Text 23. Maharaj Prithu said, "I think that upon the execution of my duties as king, I shall be able to achieve the desirable objectives described by experts in Vedic knowledge. This destination is certainly achieved by the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the seer of all destiny." Text 24. Any king who does not teach his citizens about their respective duties in terms of varna and ashram, but who simply exact tolls and taxes from them, is liable to suffer for the impious activities which have been performed by the citizens. In addition to such degradation, the king also loses his own fortune. Text 25. Prithu Maharaj continued, "Therefore, my dear citizens, for the welfare of your king after his death, you should execute your duties properly in terms of your positions of varna and ashram, and should always think of the Supreme Personality of Godhead within your hearts. By doing so, you will protect your own interest, and you will bestow mercy upon your king for his welfare after death." Text 26. I request all the pure-hearted demigods, forefathers, and saintly persons to support my proposal, for after death, the result of an action is equally shared by its doer, his director, and his supporter. Text 27. My dear respectable ladies and gentlemen, according to the authoritative statements of Shastra, there must be a supreme authority who is able to award the respective benefits of our present activities. Otherwise, why should there be persons who are unusually beautiful and powerful both in this life and in the life after death? Text 28-29. This is confirmed not only by the evidence of the Vedas, but also by the personal behavior of great personality like Manu, Uttanapada, Dhruva, Prijavrata, and my grandfather Anga. as well as by many other great personalities and ordinary living entities, exemplified by Maharaj Prahlad and Bali, all of whom are theists, believing in the existence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead who carries a cloud. Text 30. Although abominable persons like my father, Vina, the grandson of death personified, are bewildered on the path of religion, all the great personalities, like those mentioned, agree that in this world the only bestower of the benedictions of religious, economic development, sense gratification, liberation, or elevation to the heavenly planets is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 31. By the inclination to serve the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, suffering humanity can immediately cleanse the dirt which has accumulated in their minds during innumerable births. Like the Ganges water which emanates from the toes of the lotus feet of the Lord, such a process immediately cleanses the mind, and thus a spiritual or Krishna consciousness gradually increases. Text 32. When a devotee takes shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is completely cleansed of all misunderstanding or mental speculation, and he manifests renunciation. This is possible only when one is strengthened by practicing Bhakti Yoga. Once having taken shelter at the roots of the lotus feet of the Lord, a devotee never comes back to this material existence, which is full of the three false miseries. Text 33. Prithu Maharaj advises citizens, engaging your minds, your words, your bodies, and the results of your occupational duties, and being always open-minded, you should all render devotional service to the Lord, according to your abilities and the occupations in which you are situated. You should engage your service at the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead with full confidence and without reservation. Then you will surely be successful in achieving the final objective of your lives. Text 34. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is transcendental and not contaminated by this material world. But although he is concentrated spirit soul without material variety, for the benefit of the conditioned soul, he nevertheless accepts different types of sacrifice performed with various material elements, rituals, and mantras, and offered to the demigods under different names according to the interests and purposes of the performers. Text 35. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is all-pervading, but he is also manifest in different types of bodies, which arise from a combination of material nature, time, desires, and occupational duties. Thus, different types of consciousness develop just as fire, which is always basically the same, blazes in different ways according to the shape and dimension of firewood. Text 36. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the master and enjoyer of the results of all sacrifices, and he is the supreme spiritual master as well. All of you citizens on the surface of the globe who have a relationship with me and are worshiping him by dint of your occupational duties are bestowing your mercy upon me. Therefore, all my citizens, I thank you. Text 37. The Brahmanas and Vaishnavas are personally glorified by their characteristic powers of tolerance, penance, knowledge, and education. By dint of all these spiritual assets, Vaishnavas are more powerful than royalty. It is therefore advised that the princely order not exhibit his material prowess before these two communities and should avoid offending them. Text 38. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the ancient eternal Godhead, who is foremost amongst all great personalities, obtained the opulence of his staunch reputation, which purified the entire universe, by worshipping the lotus feet of those Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. Text 39. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is everlasting independent and who exists in everyone's heart, is very pleased with those who follow in his footsteps and engage without reservation in the service of the descendants of Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. For he is always dear to Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, and they are always dear to him. Text 40. By regular service to the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, one can clear the dirt from his heart and thus enjoy supreme peace and liberation from material attachment and be satisfied. In this world, there is no fruitive activity superior to serving the Brahmana class, for this can bring pleasure to the demigods for whom the many sacrifices are recommended. Text 41. Although the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Ananta, is through the fire sacrifices offered in the names of the different demigods, he does not take a much pleasure in eating two fires, as he does in accepting offerings through the mouth of learned sages and devotees, for then he does not leave the association of devotees. Text 42. In Brahminical culture, a Brahmana's transcendental position is eternally maintained because the injunctions of the Vedas are accepted with faith, austerity, scriptural conclusions, full sense and mind control, and meditation. In this way, the real goal of life is illuminated, just as one's face is fully reflected in a clean mirror. Text 43. All respectable personalities present here, I beg the blessings of all of you that I may perpetually carry on my crown, the dust of the lotus feet of such Brahmanas and Vaishnavas until the end of my life. He who can carry such dust on his head is very soon relieved of all the reactions which arise from sinful life, and eventually he develops all good and desirable qualities. Text 44. Whoever acquires the Brahminical qualification, whose only wealth is good behavior, who is grateful, and who takes shelter of experienced persons, get all the opulence of the world. I therefore wish that the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his associates be pleased with the Brahmana class, with the cows, and with me. Text 45. The great sage Maitreya said, I'm sorry. After hearing King Prithu speak so nicely, all the demigods, the denizens and Loka, the Brahmanas and the saintly persons present at the meeting congratulate him by expressing their goodwill. Text 46. They all declare that the Vedic conclusion that one can conquer the heavenly planets by the action of a putra or son was fulfilled, for the most sinful Vina, who had been killed by the curse of the Brahmanas, was now delivered from the darkest region of hellish life by his son Maharaj Prithu. Similarly, text 47. Similarly, Hiranyakashipu, who by dint of his sinful activities always defied the supremacy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, entered into the darkest region of hellish life, but by the grace of his great son Prahlad Maharaj, he also was delivered and went back home, back to Godhead. Text 48. All the saintly Brahmanas thus addressed Prithu Maharaj, O best of the warriors, O father of this globe, may you be blessed with a long life, for you have great devotion to the infallible Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the master of all the universe. Text 49. The audience continue. Dear King Prithu, your reputation is the purest of all, for you are preaching the glories of the most glorified of all, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Lord of the Brahmanas. Since, due to our great fortune, we have you as our master, we think that we are living directly under the agency of the Lord. Text 50. Our dear Lord, it is your occupational duty to rule over your citizens. That is not very wonderful task for a personality like you, who are so affectionate in seeing to the interests of the citizens, because you are full of mercy. That is the greatest of your character. Text 51. The citizens continue. Today you have opened our eyes and revealed how to cross to the other side of the ocean of darkness. By our past deeds and by the arrangement of superior authority, we are entangled in a network of fruited activities and have lost sight of our destination of life. Thus we have been wandering within the universe. Text 52. Dear Lord, you are situated in your pure existential position of goodness. Therefore, you are the perfect representative of the Supreme Lord. You are glorified by your own proudness, and thus you are maintaining the entire world by introducing Brahminical culture and protecting everyone in your line of Dasti as a chapter.
Thank you, Mataji. That was a long chapter. I should have checked with you. Maybe you could have stopped at 40, but it's fine. Yeah.
Hare Krishna, chapter 22. Prithu Maharaj's meeting with the four Kumaras. The great sage Maitreya said, while the citizens were thus praying to the most powerful King Prithu, the four Kumaras, who were as bright as the sun, arrived on the spot. Text 2. Seeing the glowing effulgence of the four Kumaras, the master of all mystic power, the king and his associates could recognize them as they descended from the sky. Text 3. Seeing the four Kumaras, Prithu Maharaj was greatly anxious to receive them. Therefore, the king, with all his officers, very hastily got up, as anxiously as a conditioned soul whose senses are immediately attracted by the modes of material nature. Text 4. When the great sages accepted their reception according to the instructions of the Shastras and finally took their seats offered by the king, influenced by the glories of the sages, immediately bowed down. Thus he worshipped the four Kumaras. Text 5. After this, the king took the water which had washed the lotus feet of the Kumaras and sprinkled it over his hair. By such respectful actions, the king, as an exemplary personality, showed how to receive a spiritually advanced personality. Text 6. The four great sages were elder to Lord Shiva, and when they were seated on the golden throne, they appeared just like fire blazing on an altar. Maharaj Prithu, out of his great gentleness and respect for them, began to speak with great restraint as follows. Text 7. King Prithu spoke, "My dear great sages, auspiciousness personified, it is very difficult for even the mystic yogis to see you. Indeed, you are very rarely seen. I do not know what kind of pious activity I performed for you to grace me by appearing before me without difficulty." Text 8. Any person upon whom the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas are pleased can achieve anything which is very rare to obtain in this world as well as after death. Not only that, but one also receives the favor of the auspicious Lord Shiva and Lord Vishnu, who accompany the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. Text 9. Prithu Maharaj continued, although you are traveling in all planetary systems, people cannot know you, just as they cannot know the super soul, although he is within everyone's heart as the witness of everything. Even Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva cannot understand the super soul. Text 10. A person who is not very rich and is attached to family life becomes highly glorified when saintly persons are present in his home. The master and servants who are engaged in offering the exalted visitors water, a sitting place, and paraphernalia for reception are glorified, and the home itself is also glorified. Text 11. On the contrary, even though full of all opulence and material prosperity, any householder's house where the devotees of the Lord are never allowed to come in and where there is no water for washing their feet is to be considered a tree in which all venomous serpents live. Text 12. Maharaj Prithu offered his welcome to the four Kumaras, addressing them as the best of the Brahmanas. He welcomed them, saying, from the beginning of your birth, you strictly observed the vows of celibacy, and although you are experienced in the path of liberation, you are keeping yourself just like small children. Text 13. Prithu Maharaj inquired from the sages about persons entangled in this dangerous material existence because of their previous actions. Could such persons, whose only aim is sense gratification, be blessed with any good fortune? Text 14. Prithu Maharaj continued, my dear sirs, there is no need to ask about your good and bad fortune because you are always absorbed in spiritual bliss. The mental concoction of the auspicious and inauspicious does not exist in you. Text 15. I am completely assured that personalities like you are the only friends for persons who are blazing in the fire of material existence. I therefore ask you how in this material world we can very soon achieve the ultimate goal of life. Text 16. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is always anxious to elevate the living entities who are his parts and parcels, and for their special benefit, the Lord travels all over the world in the form of self realized persons like you. Text 17. The great sage Maitreya continued. The Sanat Kumara, the best of the celibates, after hearing the speech of Prithu Maharaj, which was meaningful, appropriate, full of precise words, and very sweet to hear, smiled with full satisfaction and began to speak as follows. Text 18. Sanat Kumara said, My dear King Prithu, I am very nicely questioned by you. Such questions are beneficial for all living entities, especially because they are raised by you, who are always thinking of the good of others. Although you know everything, you ask such questions because that is the behavior of saintly persons. Such intelligence is befitting your position. Text 19. When there is a congregation of devotees, their discussions, questions, and answers become conclusive to both the speaker and the audience. Thus, such a meeting is beneficial for everyone's real happiness. Text 20. Sanat Kumara continued, My dear King, you already have an inclination to glorify the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such attachment is very difficult to achieve, but when one has attained such unflinching faith in the Lord, it automatically cleanses lusty desires from the core of the heart. Text 21. It has been conclusively decided in the scriptures after due consideration that the ultimate goal for the welfare of the human society is detachment from the bodily concept of life and increased and steadfast attachment for the Supreme Lord, who is transcendental beyond the modes of material nature. Text 22. Attachment for the Supreme can be increased by practicing devotional service, inquiring from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, applying Bhakti Yoga in life, worshipping the Yogeshwara, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and by hearing and chanting about the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. These actions are pious in themselves. Text 23. One has to make progress in spiritual life by not associating with persons who are simply interested in sense gratification and making money. Not only such persons, but one who associates with such persons should be avoided. One should mold his life in such a way that he cannot live in peace without drinking the nectar of the glorification of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Hari. One can be thus elevated by being disgusted with the taste for sense enjoyment. Text 24. A candidate for spiritual advancement must be non-violent, must follow in the footsteps of great acharyas, must always remember the nectar of the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, must follow the regulative principles without material desire, and while following the regulative principles should not blaspheme others. A devotee should lead a very simple life and not be disturbed by the duality of opposing elements. He should learn to tolerate them. Text 25. The devotee should gradually increase the culture of devotional service by constant hearing of the transcendental qualities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. These pastimes are like ornamental decorations on the ears of the devotees. By rendering devotional service and transcending the material qualities, one can easily be fixed in transcendence in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 26. Upon becoming fixed in his attachment to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by the grace of the spiritual master and by awakening knowledge and detachment, the living entity situated within the heart of the body and covered by the five elements burns up his material surroundings exactly as fire arising from the wood burns the wood itself. Text 27. When a person becomes devoid of all material desires and liberated from all material qualities, he transcends distinctions between actions executed externally and internally. At that time, the difference between the soul and the supersoul, which was existing before self realization, is annihilated. When a dream is over, there is no longer a distinction between the dream and the dreamer. Text 28. When the soul exists for sense gratification, he creates different desires, and for that reason, he becomes subjected to designations. But when one is in the transcendental position, he is no longer interested in anything except fulfilling the desires of the Lord. Text 29. Only because of different causes does a person see a difference between himself and others, just as one sees the reflection of a body appearing differently manifested on water, on oil, or in a mirror. Text 30. When one's mind and senses are attracted to sense objects for enjoyment, the mind becomes agitated. As a result of continually thinking of sense objects, one's real consciousness almost becomes lost, like the water in a lake that is gradually sucked up by the big grass straws on its bank. Text 31. When one deviates from his original consciousness, he loses the capacity to remember his previous position or recognize his present one. When remembrance is lost, all knowledge acquired is based on a false foundation. When this occurs, learned scholars consider that the soul is lost. Text 32. There is no stronger obstruction to one's self interest than thinking other subject matters to be more pleasing than one's self realization. Text 33. For human society, constantly thinking of how to earn money and apply it to sense gratification brings about the destruction of everyone's interest. When one becomes devoid of knowledge and devotional service, he enters into species of life like those of trees and stones. Text 34. Those who strongly desire to cross the ocean of nations must not associate with the modes of ignorance, for hedonistic activities are the greatest obstructions to realization of religious principles, economic development, regulated sense gratification, and at last liberation. Text 35. Out of the four principles, namely religion, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation, liberation has to be taken very seriously. The other three are subject to destruction by the stringent laws of nature, death. Text 36. We accept as blessings different states of higher life, distinguishing them from lower states of life. But we should know that such distinctions exist only in relation to the interchange of the modes of material nature. Actually, these states of life have no permanent existence, for all of them will be destroyed by the Supreme Controller. Text 37. Sanat Kumara advised the king, therefore, my dear King Prithu, try to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is living within everyone's heart, along with the individual soul in each and every body. Either moving or not moving, the individual souls are fully covered by the gross material body and subtle body made of the life, air, and intelligence. Text 38. The Supreme Personality of Godhead manifests himself as one with the cause and effect within this body. But one who has transcended the illusory energy by deliberate consideration, which clears the misconception of a snake for a rope, can understand that the Paramatma is eternally transcendental to the material creation and situated in pure internal energy. Thus, the Lord is transcendental to all material contamination. Unto him only must one surrender. Text 39. The devotees who are always engaged in the service of the toes of the lotus feet of the Lord can very easily overcome hard-knotted desires for fruitive activities. Because this is very difficult, the non-devotees, the jnanis and yogis, although trying to stop the waves of sense gratification, cannot do so. Therefore, you are advised to engage in the devotional service of Krishna, the son of Vasudeva. Text 40. The ocean of nations is very difficult to cross because it is infested with many dangerous sharks. Although those who are non-devotees undergo severe austerities and penances to cross that ocean, we recommend that you simply take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, which are like boats for crossing the ocean. Although the ocean is difficult to cross, by taking shelter of his lotus feet, you will overcome all dangers. Text 41. The great sage Maitreya continued, being thus enlightened in complete spiritual knowledge by the son of Brahma, one of the Kumaras who was complete in spiritual knowledge, the king worshipped them in the following words.
Okay. I can continue. Text 42. The king said, O Brahmana, O powerful one, formerly Lord Vishnu showed me his causeless mercy, indicating that you would come to my house, and to confirm that blessing, you have all come. Text 43. My dear Brahmana, you have carried out the order thoroughly because you are also as compassionate as the Lord. It is my duty, therefore, to offer you something, but all I possess are but remnants of food taken by great saintly persons. What shall I give? 44. The king continued, therefore, my dear Brahmanas, my life, wife, children, home, furniture, and household paraphernalia, my kingdom, strength, land, and especially my treasury are all offered unto you. 45. Since only a person who is completely educated according to the principles of Vedic knowledge deserves to be commander-in-chief, ruler of the state, the first to chastise, or the proprietor of the whole planet, Prithu Maharaj offered everything to the Kumaras. 46. The Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras eat their food by virtue of the Brahmanas' mercy. It is the Brahmanas who enjoy their own property, clothe themselves with their own property, and give charity with their own property. 47. Prithu Maharaja continued, how can such persons who have rendered unlimited service by explaining the path of self-realization in relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and whose explanations are given for our enlightenment with complete conviction and Vedic evidence, be repaid except by folded palms containing water for their satisfaction? Such great personalities can be satisfied only by their own activities, which are distributed amongst human society out of their unlimited mercy. 48. The great sage Maitreya continued, being thus worshipped by Maharaj Prithu, the 4 Kumaras, who were masters of devotional service, became very pleased. Indeed, they appeared in the sky and praised the character of the king, and everyone observed them. 49. Amongst great personalities, Maharaj Prithu was chief by virtue of his fixed position in relation to spiritual enlightenment. He remained satisfied as one who has achieved all success in spiritual understanding. 50. Being self-satisfied, Maharaja Prithu executed his duties as perfectly as possible according to the time and his situation, strength, and financial position. His only aim in all his activities was to satisfy the absolute truth. In this way, he duly acted. 51. Maharaja Prithu completely dedicated himself to be an eternal servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, transcendental to material nature. Consequently, all the fruits of his activities were dedicated to the Lord, and he always thought of himself as the servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the proprietor of everything. 52. Maharaja Prithu, who was very opulent due to the prosperity of his entire empire, remained at home as a householder. Since he was never inclined to utilize his opulences for the gratification of his senses, he remained unattached, exactly like the sun, which is unaffected in all circumstances. 53. Being situated in the liberated position of devotional service, Prithu Maharaj not only performed all fruitive activities, but also begot 5 sons by his wife Archi. Indeed, all his sons were begotten according to his own desire. 54. After begetting 5 sons named Vijittasva, Dhumrakesha, Haryaksha, Dravina, and Vrika, Prithu Maharaj continued to rule the planet. He accepted all the qualities of the deities who governed all other planets. 55. Since Maharaja Prithu was a perfect devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he wanted to protect the Lord's creation by pleasing the various citizens according to their various desires. Therefore, Prithu Maharaja used to please them in all respects by his words, mentality, works, and gentle behavior. Text 56. Maharaja Prithu became as celebrated a king as Somaraja, the king of the moon. He was also powerful and exacting, just like the sun god, who distributes heat and light and at the same time exacts all the planetary waters. Text 57. Maharaja Prithu was so strong and powerful that no one could disobey his orders any more than one could conquer fire itself. He was so strong that he was compared to Indra, the king of heaven, whose power is insuperable. On the other hand, Maharaja Prithu was also as tolerant as the earth, and in fulfilling various desires of human society, he was like heaven itself. 58. Just as rainfall satisfies everyone's desires, Maharaja Prithu used to satisfy everyone. He was like the sea in that no one could understand his depths, and he was like Meru, the king of hills, in the fixity of his purpose. 59. Maharaja Prithu's intelligence and education was exactly like that of Yamaraja, the superintendent of death. His opulence was comparable to the Himalaya mountains, where all valuable jewels and metals are stocked. He possessed great riches like Kuvera, the treasurer of the heavenly planets, and no one could reveal his secrets, for they were like the demigod Varunas. Text 60. In his bodily strength and in the strength of his senses, Maharaja Prithu was as strong as the wind, which can go anywhere and everywhere. As far as his tolerance was concerned, he was just like the all-powerful Rudra expansion of Lord Shiva or Sada Shiva. Text 61. In his bodily beauty, he was just like Cupid, and his thoughtfulness, he was like a lion. In his affection, he was just like Swayambhuva Manu, and in his ability to control, he was like Lord Brahma. Text 62. In his personal behavior, Prithu Maharaja exhibited all good qualities, and in spiritual knowledge, he was exactly like Brihaspati. In self-control, he was like the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. As far as his devotional service was concerned, he was a great follower of devotees who were attached to cow protection and the rendering of all service to the spiritual master and the Brahmanas. He was perfect in his shyness and in his gentle behavior, and while he engaged in some philanthropic activities, he worked as if he were working for his own personal self. Text 63. Throughout the whole universe, in the higher, lower, and middle planetary systems, Prithu Maharaja's reputation was loudly declared, and all ladies and saintly persons heard his glories, which were as sweet as the glories of Lord Ramachandra. Thus ends chapter 22. Anybody wants to read the last 4 verses in chapter 23? If not, I can read. Okay, chapter 23. Maharaja Prithu is going back home. Text 1 to 3. At the last stage of his life, when Maharaja Prithu saw himself getting old, that great soul, who was the king of the world, divided whatever opulence he had accumulated amongst all kinds of living entities, moving and non-moving. He arranged pensions for everyone according to religious principles, and after executing the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in complete coordination with him, he dedicated his sons unto the earth, which was considered to be his daughter. Then Maharaja Prithu left the presence of his citizens, who were almost lamenting and crying from feeling separation from the king, and went to the forest alone with his wife to perform austerities. Text 4. After retiring from family life, Maharaja Prithu strictly followed the regulations of retired life and underwent severe austerities in the forest. He engaged in these activities as seriously as he had formerly engaged in leading the government and conquering everyone. Okay, this ends today's verses. Since it is beyond 8 o'clock, yeah, we will not do any sharing. We'll end there. Anchakalpatarubhyasya kripa sindhubhya vacha Atitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Nandakodi Vaishnava Nandaki Jai. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.